Her son yanked her cane away and waved it like a joke, while his guests howled with laughter. Eleanor Wynne, retired accountant and widow, simply smiled. Justin, her only child, had no idea he'd just forfeited the house he bragged about building. By sundown, his loan would freeze, his title revoked, and his name stripped from every account she once co-signed. She'd walked quietly beside him for years. But that day, she walked away. And when he came begging for help, the trust said everything she never had to. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The air at Justin's backyard BBQ smelled of cedar smoke and overcooked bratwurst. The new deck glistened like a catalog ad, fresh stain, string lights looped with architectural precision, and people Eleanor didn't recognize sipping craft beers as if they belonged in his curated world. She adjusted the collar of her pale blue blouse, a little too crisp for the occasion, and rested both hands on the curved silver handle of her cane. "Mom!" Justin's voice sliced through the music. "You made it!" She smiled and waved, stepping carefully onto the flagstone path. Her balance wasn't perfect today. Damp grass from the sprinkler runoff had made the ground soft. She hated walking on uneven surfaces, hated the way her son watched her walk now, like it annoyed him. He swept over, holding a beer in one hand, his other arm draped around a tall blonde she assumed was Claire. "Everyone, this is my mother, Eleanor, the one who taught me how to grill a burger with actual seasoning." His smile was easy. Too easy. A few polite laughs. One woman in a linen romper gave her an appraising glance. Eleanor nodded, gently tapping her cane against the patio stone. Then Justin snatched it. Like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat, he grabbed her cane mid-sentence and raised it high. "You don't need this fossil stick, Ma. Come on. It's not even real silver, just good lighting." A ripple of laughter rolled through the group. Justin twirled the cane in a mock fencing pose, then leaned on it dramatically like an old man. Eleanor stood still, her hands suddenly empty, heart ticking slowly in her chest. The silence behind her eyes was deafening. "I guess I'll need a cane when I'm your age too, huh?" Justin went on, still performing, still oblivious. She let out a small, rehearsed laugh, thin and hollow. "Careful," she said. "You might start enjoying the support." He tossed the cane onto a nearby deck chair and gave her a quick side hug, already turning back to his crowd. Claire whispered something in his ear. He smirked. Eleanor stepped back. No one noticed. She found her way to the patio edge, eyes locked on the chair where the cane now rested like a forgotten toy. Her gait wobbled slightly as she began walking toward the side gate, each step measured. Slow. Her heels sank once into the soil, but she kept her chin up. Not one person looked her way. She reached her car alone. Inside the driver's seat, she paused. Both hands gripped the steering wheel, the leather warm under her fingers. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, but her teeth clenched just enough to ache in her molars. Back home, Eleanor placed her handbag down with precise care. The hallway was quiet, the evening air thick with jasmine from the garden just beyond the glass doors. She poured herself a glass of filtered water and sat at her kitchen table. Oak, well-oiled, older than Justin himself. The text was short, punctuated. "Kindly return my cane tomorrow." She watched the delivered status shift to read at 9:14 p.m. No reply. She placed her phone down face up. Then she rose, walked to the study, and opened the small drawer beneath the locked cabinet where her trust papers were stored. A thick envelope labeled in her tidy handwriting, "Ownership." Inside, deed copies, escrow documents, and the one clause Justin had never read thoroughly, despite her asking twice. Eleanor placed the envelope flat on her desk. She pulled the lamp chain, illuminating the paper's sharp edges. From her pocket, she drew out a small polishing cloth and carefully wiped a speck of dust from the file label. Her hand hovered over the corner of the envelope, steady now. She did not sit. She stood, back straight, cane forgotten, somewhere in a stranger's backyard, and said aloud, to no one, "Let's see how sturdy that deck really is." The cane was on her front porch when she woke up. not leaning gently against the door, not wrapped in apology, but hurled, half on the welcome mat, half in the rose bush. Eleanor noticed the scratch along its shaft immediately. The silver was dulled where it had scraped the brick. She didn't open the door right away, just stood behind the screen, arms folded, watching it lie there like roadkill. When she finally stepped out, her hands moved with slow reverence. She bent, lifted the cane as if retrieving a wounded limb, and brought it inside. In the quiet of her foyer, she took a soft microfiber cloth from the drawer by the entry mirror and began to wipe the dirt away. Inch by inch. A ritual, not a reaction. It was the care she had once given to Justin's baby shoes, polishing them before putting them in storage. It was the kind of gentleness she had long since stopped receiving from her son. The scratch wouldn't come out. She set the cane down on the side table and walked to her study. The envelope labeled ownership still lay unopened. Her fingers hovered over it, but instead of reaching inside, she pivoted to her desk and picked up the phone. Her financial advisor, Leonard, answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I want to review my revocation options," she said, her voice even, the same tone she used when confirming lunch reservations. There was a pause on the other end. "Regarding the escrow?" "Yes," she said. "That house." He cleared his throat. "You still have discretionary control. That clause hasn't changed. You requested it when you co-signed. Quiet, but binding. Do you want to initiate a freeze?" "Not yet," she replied. "Just send me the clause. I want it printed." "Will do." She hung up. No thank you, no small talk. She printed the clause 30 minutes later. 2 clean pages, clearly marked with her signature and Justin's, both notarized. The part she wanted was in bold. Eleanor C. Wynne retains full discretionary rights to revoke, withhold, or freeze co-signed assets, should circumstances reflect breach of personal or fiduciary trust. She underlined it once, in red. At noon, Darlene arrived, carrying a pie that looked store-bought but was still warm in the center. Eleanor had met Darlene at a legal literacy workshop 3 years ago. A widow, sharp as flint, with a pension and a courtroom stare. The kind of friend who didn't flinch when things got ugly. "Did you talk to him?" Darlene asked as she settled on the sofa. Eleanor shook her head. "He returned the cane. Or rather, he threw it." Darlene frowned, her gaze landing on the cane resting on the side table like a relic in a private museum. "He really doesn't get it, does he?" "No," Eleanor said softly. "And that's the part I can't fix." She handed Darlene the escrow clause. Watched her read it. Watched the moment her lips tightened. "You put this in when you co-signed?" Eleanor nodded. Darlene looked up. "He doesn't know. I doubt he remembers signing it." "Smart," Darlene said, folding the page once before handing it back. "You always did play the long game." They sat quietly, the pie untouched. A ceiling fan hummed overhead. "I didn't mind helping him," Eleanor said finally. "Even after he rushed the engagement. Even after he said it was just a formality. I believed in giving quietly." "And now?" Darlene asked. Eleanor exhaled slowly. "Now I believe in taking it back." There was no venom in her voice, just the certainty of a tide turning. Outside, wind lifted the corner of the welcome mat. Something sharp scraped across the sidewalk, a stray branch maybe, or a loose gutter spike. But Eleanor didn't turn to look. Her eyes were fixed on the study door. "I'm calling Melissa," she said. Darlene raised an eyebrow. "Your estate attorney?" "Yes," Eleanor replied, rising to her feet with deliberate grace. "It's time I asked a few more specific questions." She walked toward the study, cane in hand, no limp this time. Melissa Chang's office wasn't the kind of place you stumbled into off the street. It sat above a boutique stationery store in a converted Victorian with polished brass railings and deep green shutters. The kind of discreet building that said, "If you're here, you've already done your research." Eleanor entered without ceremony. Her appointment had been made quietly, late the night before, through Melissa's secure client portal. She wore navy slacks and a quilted jacket. Respectable, understated. No one glanced twice. Melissa rose from behind her desk as Eleanor stepped in. Late 30s, Blazer sharp, black hair pulled into a bun that didn't move. A gold legal scale paperweight sat beside a framed photo of her dog. Nothing else cluttered the surface. Eleanor, always a pleasure. She gestured toward the leather armchair across from her. You mentioned it was time. Eleanor placed a manila folder on the desk and sat. It is. Melissa didn't need to open it. She already knew. Escrow. Eleanor nodded once. Clause 14. Co-signed support. I want to initiate withdrawal. Melissa leaned forward, hands steepled. Any communication from him since? He threw the cane, Eleanor said calmly. Scratched it. Melissa didn't flinch. That meets the behavioral breach threshold. Disrespect or endangerment to the co-signer is sufficient under California's personal revocation standards, especially when elder status is documented. Which it is, Eleanor said. You helped me draft the record last year. Melissa gave a small nod of admiration. Smart woman. Most people wait until after they're cornered. I prefer to prepare before I'm backed into anything, Eleanor replied. Melissa pulled a slim packet from her drawer. This is the notice of withdrawal of escrow support. Once signed, it initiates a 10-day lock on funds. No dispersal, no transfer. Gives you space before it becomes adversarial. Eleanor scanned the first page, then the second, reading each word as though carving it into memory. She didn't ask Melissa to summarize, didn't need to. Her pen glided in clean strokes along the signature line. Melissa placed the document into a confidential courier envelope. It goes to the escrow manager by noon. Title office will be notified as a courtesy. Your bank will confirm the hold within the hour. Good, Eleanor said, standing slowly. Let's see how well Justin handles a pause. Outside, she didn't walk straight to her car. Instead, she stepped into the stationery shop below. The scent of ink and leather hit her as she ran a fingertip along the edge of a hardbound journal. She purchased it without a word and tucked it into her handbag, an empty book for whatever came next. That night, she stood at her kitchen counter brewing chamomile tea when her phone vibrated. A tag notification. Justin.win. Nothing like a fresh start. Home is where the heart and the deed is. Beneath the caption, a filtered photo of Justin and Claire on the deck. Her deck. Or at least the one that still had her name attached. Eleanor stared at the screen, then set it face down without reacting. She didn't text, didn't call. She walked to the den, sat in her father's old reading chair, and pulled the new journal from her bag. On the first page, she wrote, June 5th, the pause begins. Not revenge, just redirection. Then she folded her hands, leaned back, and closed her eyes. The clock ticked softly behind her. Outside, the wind shifted, and in a bank's digital server across town, a green progress bar loaded toward completion. Hold confirmed, escrow lock, 10 business days. Eleanor preferred the hum of early mornings. They moved slower, cleaner. The world hadn't started pretending yet. By 7:45 a.m., she was seated at her kitchen table, the escrow withdrawal packet open beside a fresh pot of Earl Grey. Everything was in place, initials, page flags, courier instructions, but the final signature line remained blank. Her pen rested beside it like a loaded pistol waiting for permission. She glanced at the small analog clock by the sink. Not yet. Instead, she opened her laptop and printed a clean list titled, Closing Agent, Pre-Drop Checklist. Below it, 5 items, each box already ticked, except one. She reached into her drawer and removed the title company's business card. Margaret H. Reeves, Senior Escrow Officer. She placed it next to the document, then slid both into a gray leather folder. Still unsigned, still waiting. The kettle whistled low and steady, then clicked off. By noon, Eleanor was pulling into Justin's driveway. She wasn't invited, of course not, but she'd called Claire the day before with a pretense about dropping off the champagne glasses she promised. Claire, always disorganized, had mumbled something about being totally swamped and told her to just swing by if you're nearby. She was. The front door was propped open with a garden rock shaped like a hedgehog. The kitchen hummed with the sharp clatter of metal and voices. Caterers. Eleanor stepped over an extension cord and into a house that still smelled of drywall dust and greed. No one greeted her. She moved quietly through the foyer, champagne glasses wrapped neatly in a canvas tote. Justin wasn't around, probably off chasing ego with a drone camera or monogrammed coasters. Claire's voice floated in from the backyard, rising above the others. Eleanor followed the sound to the sliding door and paused just before stepping out. Claire was at the far end of the patio, holding a clipboard and gesturing toward the bar setup. A young woman in a catering polo nodded dutifully. Then Claire glanced down at something, Eleanor's sensible flats, and muttered, "God, I swear if she wears those orthopedic hooves again." The caterer gave a polite, confused chuckle. Eleanor stepped back, letting the curtain fall silently in front of her. She didn't flinch, didn't react. Instead, she turned around and walked to the front of the house, placing the tote of glasses carefully on the entry console. A handwritten card tucked neatly inside read, "Cheers to New Beginnings. E." She let herself out quietly, her heels clicking once on the tile, then swallowed by the noise of party prep and shallow chatter. At 3:10 p.m. she sat in the parking lot outside Midstate Title and Escrow, her fingers tapping a rhythm against the folder now resting on her lap. Inside it, the final page remained unsigned. She watched people come and go from the building. One woman exited holding balloons. Another man, agitated, left with a folder tucked under his arm and a Bluetooth earpiece flashing like a warning light. Finally, she picked up her phone and dialed. A woman's voice answered, "Midstate Title, this is Maggie. Margaret Reeves, please. This is Eleanor Wynne. I'd like to book a document handoff for tomorrow morning." "Ms. Wynne," the receptionist replied crisply. "Yes, Ms. Reeves is available at 10:15 a.m. Shall I block it?" "Yes, please confirm me." "Done." Eleanor ended the call and stared down at the folder. The gray leather gleamed faintly in the late sun. A quiet power. She opened it, uncapped her pen, and signed the last line with deliberate pressure. Her handwriting looked like her mother's, measured, impossible to forge. She returned the pen to its clip, closed the folder, and placed it on the passenger seat beside her. Then she turned the key in the ignition. The car purred to life, but Eleanor didn't move. She just sat, watching her reflection in the rearview mirror. No rage, no pain, only math. 10 days left. At 10:14 a.m., Eleanor stepped through the frosted glass doors of Midstate Title and Escrow, with the gray leather folder clutched under one arm and a pair of dark tortoiseshell sunglasses hiding her eyes. The receptionist greeted her, but Eleanor offered only a nod as she walked past the front desk straight into the glass-walled office of Margaret Reeves. "Ms. Wynne," Margaret said, standing quickly. "Come in. We're ready when you are." Eleanor sat, placed the folder on the polished table, and unzipped it with slow, exacting fingers. Inside, the signed notice of withdrawal of escrow support and a supplemental request for title freeze under pending legal discretion. "No delays?" Eleanor asked. "None," Margaret said. "We'll notify the escrow manager and the lending bank this morning. The freeze flags within the hour." Eleanor slid the documents forward. "Then proceed." Margaret nodded and buzzed her assistant. "Scan and upload. Real time." As the scanner clicked softly beside her, Eleanor folded her hands in her lap. Her posture didn't change, her breath didn't quicken. But her pulse moved like a second hand, clean, purposeful, unblinking. By 10:47 a.m., the file was confirmed received. At 11:02 a.m., the escrow officer responded via secure line. "Escrow freeze active. Title flag issued. Partial loan hold initiated pending funding audit." Eleanor read it once, closed the email, and stood. She thanked Margaret with a firm handshake, her voice low and smooth. "Please confirm with my attorney, Melissa Chang, for all future correspondence." Then she left. No ceremony, no champagne glasses. Across town, Justin Wynne was trying to unlock his front door while balancing 2 pressed suit bags and a box labeled Bourbon Bar Setup. The key jammed for a moment. He cursed under his breath. Inside, Claire was hunched over her laptop, phone pressed to her ear. When she saw his face, she held up a finger. "No, I need that cleared today. Today." She ended the call and exhaled sharply. "The realtor just called." Something's wrong with the escrow. Justin dumped the suit bags on the counter. What do you mean wrong? There's a funding block, she said, eyes wide now. Half the money is in, but the rest won't release. They're saying a signer revoked support. The title company can't finish the transfer without it. Justin's stomach dropped. That's not possible. The money's already in the system. Claire shoved her laptop toward him. Read it yourself. On screen was a forwarded message from the escrow office. Support party, Eleanor C. Wynne. Status, revoked. Title flag applied. Contact your legal representative. He stared at the screen, blinking hard, as if the text would reshape into something else. What the hell does this mean? Claire demanded. It means... He started, voice thin now. She had a clause, something about discretionary rights. I didn't think she'd actually... Didn't think? Claire's voice cracked like a whip. Justin, if we lose this house because you couldn't keep your mother happy for 2 more weeks... She was overreacting. I gave her the cane back. Claire rounded the island. Oh, you gave it back? How noble. Justin snatched up his phone and scrolled frantically through his contacts. He hit her name. Ringing. 1 ring, 2. Then voicemail. Mom, he said, breath clipped. I need to talk to you. There's a situation with the title. Something about revocation? Please call me back. This is urgent. He ended the call and immediately tried again. Voicemail. Again. Straight to voicemail. At 12:38 p.m., Eleanor sat by her garden window with a linen napkin in her lap, slicing into a warm spinach quiche from the co-op down the street. Her phone vibrated 3 times on the counter. She didn't flinch, didn't even reach for it. On the journal beside her plate, a single line was freshly written. June 6th. Action begins. Not rage, just release. She turned the page. Blank. Waiting. Outside, the sprinkler clicked on, and the roses bowed. The knock came at 8:12 a.m. Too early for neighbors, too late for deliveries. Eleanor already knew who it was. She had heard the tires on the gravel, the soft pause before the car door shut. She let the silence stretch for another 3 seconds before moving. She opened the door to find Claire standing stiffly on the porch, her oversized sunglasses doing little to hide the turmoil in her face. Her mouth moved like it wanted to start 5 sentences at once. Come in, Eleanor said, stepping aside without inflection. Claire hesitated, then crossed the threshold like she was stepping onto thin ice. The house was quiet, filled with the clean scent of lemon polish and something herbal, chamomile maybe, or sage. In the sunlit dining room, the table had already been set for 2. 2 white mugs, a steaming pot, linen napkins. Eleanor gestured to a seat across from her own. Claire sat, smoothing her leggings, glancing at the floral centerpiece like it might explode. I'm not here to argue, Claire said quickly, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I don't understand what's happening. We're almost married. We're trying to build a future. This is hurting Justin. Eleanor poured tea into both cups, the sound like a soft waterfall. She didn't offer sugar. Claire didn't ask. Claire pressed forward, voice tremoring at the edges. He's panicking, Eleanor. This whole thing with the escrow, it's not just about money. We've made plans. Everything's already in motion. We have vendors paid, the down payment in, the inspections cleared. Then you should have inspected his behavior, Eleanor said softly. Claire blinked. Eleanor's voice remained level, unbothered. He mocked me, in front of friends, strangers, took something that supported me, something that mattered, and used it as a joke. Claire opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I think he didn't mean anything by it. He's under pressure. Eleanor tilted her head. Did you laugh? Claire flinched. No, I don't think so. I don't remember. Eleanor lifted her teacup, took a calm sip, then placed it gently on the saucer. I do. Claire's hands tightened around the mug, though she hadn't touched her tea. Look, I'm not here to excuse him. I'm here because I thought maybe, if you could just talk to him, hear him out. You're not here for him, Eleanor interrupted, still gentle. You're here because you're scared the house might fall through. that the wedding will become a downgrade, that the Instagram version of your life won't happen. Claire looked wounded. That's not fair. No, Eleanor agreed. Fair would be if I'd humiliated him publicly and then handed him a warm pie and a hug. Claire's lip trembled. He's still your son. Eleanor nodded once. And I will always be his mother, but that doesn't require me to fund his cruelty. Silence settled between them like dust. Then Eleanor stood, walked slowly to the buffet table, and picked up her phone. She tapped twice and turned the screen toward Claire. It was a video, 37 seconds. Justin at the BBQ, holding the cane, fencing with it like a toy, laughter bubbling around him. His voice, loud, smug, calling it a fossil stick. Claire's own laugh could be heard faintly in the background, paired with the crunch of chips. Claire's face drained of color. I didn't realize. He posted it, Eleanor said, lowering the phone. Before taking it down, Claire looked down at her lap. Her voice, when it came, was nearly a whisper. I didn't know he was that mean. Eleanor sat back down. Her hands remained folded. Still, he has never needed to be kind, she said, because no one ever required it of him. Claire's eyes met hers. Are you going to undo it? The revocation? Eleanor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm going to let the clock run, she said, pouring more tea. That's what escrow's for. The pot clinked lightly against the rim. Outside, the mail truck pulled up. Inside, the silence tightened. Claire didn't touch her tea. Claire stood at the self-checkout kiosk at Marlowe's Market, her phone clenched in one hand and a reusable tote sagging with overpriced almond flour in the other. The register blinked red. Card declined. Please try another. She tried again. Same result. The platinum visa, embossed with Justin's last name and her first initial, had never failed before. It was linked to the joint premarital account Eleanor had gifted them access to last spring. She tapped the screen and scrolled through her mobile banking app. Access restricted. Authorization required. Claire's stomach tightened. Her phone buzzed, an incoming email. She clicked it open with her thumb, already sensing the tone before reading the first word. From Law Office of Melissa Chang. Subject: Notification of unauthorized financial activity. Claire read it once, then twice. The phrasing was surgical. This notice pertains to flagged secondary usage of joint financial accounts for non-essential discretionary purchases without authorization from primary holder, Eleanor C. Wynne. Continued activity under these conditions constitutes financial overreach. Further access has been rescinded. Please consider this a formal boundary clarification, not a punitive action. She could barely feel her legs. Behind her, someone sighed. The cashier politely waved another customer to the next lane. Claire stepped aside, her almond flour forgotten. She exited the store in a fog. Back in her car, she slammed the door and called Justin, straight to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. This time, it was Claire who left the message. Her voice was cracking. Justin, I just got shut out of the account. There's a legal notice from your mom's lawyer. You said this was all noise. Just a scare tactic, but this is real. This is happening. Across town, Eleanor sat at her desk reviewing the flagged activity report from her financial auditor. She'd requested the audit weeks ago, long before the BBQ incident, after a monthly notice showed a sudden rise in boutique withdrawals and catering deposits she hadn't authorized. She tapped a fingernail against the screen, slowly scrolling. June 2nd. Caviar app, $438. Private chef deposit June 4th. Pollen and stem, floral, $812. Rush centerpiece order, June 5th. Beauty skin clinic, $193. Wedding prep facial. None of it hers. All of it tagged to Claire's secondary login. She clicked Revoke Access, then opened a new browser tab and navigated to her private trust account portal. It was time. 2 signatures later, the funds were transferred. Not just removed from the joint account, but redirected entirely into a protected elder safeguard trust, held under irrevocable designation, with Eleanor listed as sole beneficiary and Darlene as alternate executor. The transfer was instantaneous. The firewall was final. A soft chime sounded from her phone. A voicemail. Justin again. Eleanor didn't listen. She didn't need to hear the panic, the excuses. She simply forwarded the message to her archive and muted the number for 30 days. Then she picked up her pen. Journal entry, June 7th. Money is not love. Boundaries are not cruelty. She capped the pen and stood. Meanwhile, in Justin's living room, tension crackled like static. Claire paced with her phone in hand while Justin sat frozen on the couch, phone to his ear, listening to the hollow ring that never picked up. "She sent me a lawyered-up notice," Claire snapped. "You said you had control of that account." "I did," he barked back. "She gave me full access. She said she trusted me." Claire stopped mid-step, eyes narrowed. "Number she said she was co-signing. You never read the paperwork, did you?" Justin's face flushed red. "It was ceremonial. I mean, she wanted to feel included." "Well, she's included now," Claire hissed, "as in, she owns everything we're losing." She threw the legal letter onto the coffee table. It slid halfway off, catching on the glossy edge of a catalog. Justin didn't move. Neither of them did. Until Claire's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Eleanor, it was the realtor. Claire answered on speaker. "Hi, Claire," came the clipped voice. "Sorry to bother again, but I just received a new notice. The remaining disbursement window has been flagged pending elder trust authorization. I'm not sure what's going on, but we can't move forward with the closing until this is sorted out." Claire's hand tightened around the phone. "So, we've officially lost access?" "Unless something changes," the realtor said. "Yes." The line went dead. So did the room. The invitation hadn't arrived in her mailbox, her inbox, or her voicemail, but Eleanor knew about the bridal shower all the same. A whispered tip from the florist, a screenshot from Darlene's niece who still followed Claire on Instagram. The geotag had been careless. Justin's house this Saturday at 2 p.m. "A gathering of sisterhood," the caption read, complete with pastel font and clinking glasses emojis. Eleanor dressed with surgical intention, a slate-gray blouse, pearl earrings, and the softest smile she owned. The cane was polished. Her shoes were the same pair Claire had mocked, the so-called orthopedic hooves. At 2:07 p.m., she arrived at the curb. She didn't park directly out front. That would be performative. She parked down the block, tucked between two SUVs. From the back seat, she retrieved a cream gift bag with a gold foil tag. "To Claire," with warmth and transparency. Inside were 3 envelopes, sealed in legal-grade linen paper, each one marked in crisp calligraphy. Disclosure. She didn't knock, she simply walked in. The patio was filled with women in gauzy dresses holding rosé and humming compliments. A hired harpist played a breathy rendition of Fields of Gold near the hydrangeas. Claire was mid-toast, holding a glass of something pink and fizzing, when she saw her. The glass lowered an inch. Her jaw, too. Eleanor smiled and walked forward, steady and unhurried until she reached the gift table. With gentle care, she placed the cream bag in the center, nestled between monogrammed towels and a wrapped Le Creuset box. Conversations began to falter. She gave Claire a respectful nod, then turned toward the exit. Someone near the mimosa bar whispered, "Is that her?" A second voice answered, "The one from the house situation?" Claire didn't speak. Her cheeks burned with a crimson that no blush could fix. As Eleanor walked away, she heard the bag being opened. Tissue paper crackling. A sharp intake of breath. Then silence. In the front seat of her car, Eleanor exhaled with precision. She didn't check her mirrors. She didn't look back. Darlene opened the passenger door a few moments later, holding 2 iced lemon waters from the cafe down the road. "Well?" she asked, handing one over. Eleanor took a slow sip. 3 copies, full legal proof. Escrow withdrawal, trust transfer, co-ownership documentation, bound with gold clips. Darlene's grin grew wicked. "You dropped a truth bomb in a baby pink war zone." Eleanor didn't smile, but she looked satisfied. "She wanted a shower," she said, setting the drink in the console. "I brought the forecast." Darlene leaned back in her seat. That was operatic. Eleanor glanced toward the house. She could just make out Claire in the window, clutching a sheet of paper in both hands, lips moving quickly as 2 bridesmaids hovered behind her. In the distant backyard, laughter had stopped. The harpist had paused. Only the wind rustled now. Her phone buzzed once on silent. Justin Wynne, calling. Eleanor pressed decline. Then she turned to Darlene. Let's go. As the car pulled away, Claire stepped onto the porch, her fists still full of Eleanor's signatures. Too late. The waiting room outside Melissa Chang's office was quieter than usual. Eleanor sat perfectly still, ankles crossed, watching the second hand of the brass wall clock slice through time. No fidgeting, no nervousness, just the stillness of someone who had already done her grieving in advance. Melissa opened the door herself. We're ready. Inside, the blinds were drawn. The conference table bore no papers yet, only a carafe of water and 2 glasses, one already poured. Eleanor sat at her usual spot. Justin filed a preliminary complaint, Melissa said without preamble. Unlawful interference, breach of implied agreement, a few vague stabs at elder abuse as counterweight. Eleanor didn't flinch. Did he remember the clause? Melissa smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. Of course not. The judge flagged it on first review. He signed the discretionary control clause himself, 2 years ago. I pulled the time-stamped PDF, notarized, witnessed. He has no case. Eleanor nodded. So we escalate? We countersue, Melissa confirmed. Not for damages, but for defamation and attempted coercion. You'll be seen not just as someone asserting legal rights, but defending your personal dignity under elder protection. She slid a stapled packet across the table. Read and initial where marked. We'll file by end of day. Eleanor took the packet. Her initials bloomed in clean ink on each tabbed page, as methodical as rainfall. No hesitation. When she finished, Melissa leaned back, folding her arms. Once we submit, I'll request expedited review. He's going to fold within the week. Eleanor looked down at her final signature, then let him fold. 3 days later, the court response arrived. Petitioner's claim, dismissed. Counterclaim, upheld. Escrow freeze, legally valid. Trust transition, fully protected. Coercion claim, rejected with prejudice. Justin had forgotten not just the clause, but the time-stamped email from Eleanor 2 years ago requesting he consult a lawyer before co-signing. That email was printed and filed, and now, court reviewed. Melissa called to deliver the final note. We're clear. Eleanor didn't smile, but she let out one long, measured breath, like releasing the last line of a tightly wound stitch. Later that afternoon, Eleanor typed up a short letter on linen paper. 1 paragraph, 1 signature. To the residents of Bellecrest HOA. This is to inform you that my name has been fully withdrawn from the escrow, title interest, and financial support of 14 Maple Glen Lane. Any further communications related to this address may be directed to Mr. Justin Wynne, the sole remaining party. Respectfully, Eleanor C. Wynne. She printed 12 copies. At 4 p.m., she hand-delivered one to the HOA office. The rest went into the neighborhood mail slots. Neighbors watched her walk, upright, cane steady, blouse crisp. They said nothing, but they read. By 6 p.m., her phone buzzed. Martha Brenner, HOA treasurer. Got your letter. Just, wow, respectfully handled. Nancy from Unit 3. Didn't know the full story. Now I do. Good for you. Gary Tan, Landscaping Committee. Everyone's whispering. In a good way. She placed her phone down gently and walked into the living room. Her journal waited. June 11th. Respect does not arrive in noise. It arrives in documents. She closed the book. Outside, across the street, the real estate sign that once said, "Pending, beautifully updated," now hung slightly askew. Someone had added a handwritten sticker, "Back on market." Justin sat on the kitchen floor, back against the dishwasher, eyes staring at the tile. His laptop glowed in front of him with an error message. Escrow chain. Authorization rejected. Claire stood by the sliding glass door, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "She sent the letter," she said. "Everyone's read it." Justin didn't respond. Claire turned. "You lost your own house because you couldn't keep your ego quiet for one barbecue." Justin picked up his phone. He texted Eleanor, "Please, just talk to me." The message turned blue, delivered, but never read. The wind had shifted by morning. It was the kind of breeze that moved quietly, but with intent, like it knew something others didn't. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table in a tailored navy cardigan, a single manila folder open beside her teacup. Inside, the final form. Title freeze request, revocable living trust filing. Her attorney had already reviewed it. The signatures had been collected. All it needed now was drop-off and timestamp. She flipped to the second page and double-checked the names. Primary trustee, Eleanor C. Wynn, successor trustee. Emergency executor, Darlene Monroe. She allowed herself one breath of satisfaction. Not because she didn't trust institutions, but because she trusted Darlene more. At 9:32 a.m., she walked it through the double-glass doors of the county title registrar and placed the envelope directly into the hands of a clerk who looked barely old enough to rent a car. Eleanor made him read the label aloud, then she made him timestamp the drop in front of her. He did. The call came at 1:06 p.m. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway. "This is Eleanor Wynn." The voice was nervous, male, mid-30s, realtor, trying to sound cheerful. "Hi, Ms. Wynn, I'm, representing your son and his fiancée. I just had a quick question. Nothing legal, just some clarity. We're in the final loan reconfirmation stage with a secondary lender, and your name, well, it's still showing up on the title preview. I just wanted to confirm you're aware, maybe even still supporting?" Eleanor stood at the window, staring out at the roses she'd recently pruned back into obedience. "They're using my name again," she asked calmly. "Not intentionally, I'm sure," he stammered. "I think it's just legacy paperwork. Sometimes things get lost in the shuffle." "No," she said. "This wasn't lost. It was ignored." A long pause. Eleanor's voice dropped half an octave. "Please take this as official notification that any use of my name or co-signature post-withdrawal is unauthorized and subject to legal fraud flagging." "Oh," the man said quickly. I'm not trying to cause a stir, Ms. Wynn. I'll make a note and alert the lender." "You'll do more than that," Eleanor replied. "You'll forward me the name of the lender by 3 p.m., or I'll file the fraud alert myself." The line was quiet for a beat. Then, "Yes, understood." She hung up. Then she pulled out her iPad and opened the local finance authority's online portal. Under Protective Alerts, she tapped New Fraud Flag and began to fill in the form. By 2:41 p.m., it was submitted. By 3:07 p.m., it was confirmed. Her revocable trust and freeze status were now on federal lender visibility. At 3:15, her phone buzzed again. "Darlene. Just saw the moving truck back out of their driveway. No unloading. Someone looks like they got bad news." Eleanor didn't respond. Instead, she opened her journal and began to write. "June 13th. They tried to use my name as currency. I made it a firewall." She capped the pen just as another message arrived. This time, from an unknown number. A photo, Justin's front porch, empty. The caption read, "Truck left. No keys. Buyer withdrew." Meanwhile, inside the gutted living room, Claire paced barefoot on the hardwood, the echo of each step sounding more final than the last. "The lender pulled out," she hissed. "They saw your mother's name in the wrong place and flagged the whole damn thing. Justin, do you even understand what that means?" Justin sat on the edge of the kitchen counter, head in hands. "She filed a fraud alert," he muttered. Claire's jaw clenched. "She buried the deal, Justin. I thought the backup plan would work." "You thought wrong." She turned toward the window just as the moving truck pulled away. The shadow of it passed across the walls like a thundercloud. The front door still had the lockbox attached. They never got the code. Claire whispered something under her breath and reached for her phone. Justin tried to stop her. "What are you doing?" "Texting her," Claire said. "Someone has to make this stop." Justin reached out, but she had already typed the message. "Claire, 1:24 p.m. Can we please talk? We're drowning." The screen stayed quiet. Then, "Read." No reply. The binder was navy blue. Hardback. Matte finish. No label. Eleanor placed it carefully on the porch of 14 Maple Glen Lane just before sunrise, before the neighborhood dog walkers stirred, before the HOA enforcers began their slow patrols of grass length and garage violations. She didn't ring the bell, didn't knock. Inside the binder, 78 pages of documentation, every signed clause, every withdrawal, every notarized timestamp, fronted with a crisp, single-sheet note in her unmistakable cursive. "You took my cane. I took your safety net. E." She walked away without looking back, the faint scent of her gardenia perfume lingering longer than she did. Justin found the binder an hour later, bleary-eyed in boxers. Claire still curled up on the couch under a throw blanket that didn't belong to either of them. The bag of takeout from last night lay untouched on the counter. No appetite. No hope. When he opened the front door, the binder stood out like a monolith on the doormat. He recognized her handwriting instantly. His hands trembled as he brought it inside. The note came first. He read it 3 times. Then he flipped through the pages, each one screaming what he had refused to hear. She had warned him, quietly, legally, repeatedly, and he'd mocked it all as theater. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Claire stirred. "What is that?" Justin didn't answer. He picked up his phone and called her, straight to voicemail. He called again, and again. By the 4th time, she picked up, just long enough for him to hear her breathing. "Mom, please." Eleanor didn't speak. She listened. Once. His voice broke halfway through the sentence. She ended the call, blocked the number. Then she placed the phone into the drawer beside her reading chair and went back to folding laundry, pressing each towel into tight, symmetrical thirds. She moved with the calm of someone who had already said everything that mattered. That evening, Eleanor stepped into Darlene's house through the side entrance, carrying a bottle of Malbec and 2 stemless glasses wrapped in a linen napkin. The backyard was already glowing with string lights. 3 other women, Sharon, Ava, and Deb, were seated around a low fire pit, nursing pale Chardonnays and stories that sagged with decades. Darlene greeted her at the door with a raised eyebrow. "It done?" Eleanor handed her the bottle. "It's finished, and then some." They clinked glasses. No speeches, no toasts. Just a shared silence that said, "We've all been underestimated, and we're still here." Eleanor settled into a seat near the fire. She hadn't realized how tired her shoulders had felt until she sat down. "Tell us," Sharon said gently, adjusting her shawl. "What finally tipped it?" Eleanor sipped, then spoke, not loudly, but with weight. The cane was never about the cane. It was about permission, about how many times I'd allowed myself to be minimized because I thought love required swallowing dignity. Deb nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I know love doesn't have to come at the cost of respect," Eleanor said, "especially from your own child." The women exchanged glances, nothing performative, just a shared ledger of lessons. Ava leaned in. "Did he ever apologize?" Eleanor looked into her glass. The reflection of the fire shimmered red across the surface. "He called. I listened once." That was enough. There was a beat of silence. Then Darlene raised her glass again, quieter this time. "To listening once." They drank. Above them, the wind shifted again, this time warmer, softer. Eleanor looked up at the stars peeking through the branches, a smile just touching the corner of her mouth. Her journal would wait until morning, but in her mind, a line was already forming. June 14th. Peace arrives not with permission, but with proof. The slide at the front of the room read, "Elder autonomy and financial boundaries, the win precedent." Eleanor sat quietly in the front row of the conference room, hands folded in her lap, cane resting against her chair. The Hilton Ballroom had been converted into a modest symposium hall, long tables, carafes of water, and tasteful blue folders stamped with the National Credit Union Ethics Alliance seal. Melissa Chang stood at the podium in a structured gray dress, her clicker in hand. "This is a story not about revenge," she told the audience of executives, auditors, and community lenders, "but about foresight, about preparedness, about what it means when a woman, particularly a mother, is told her name is only useful when it's passive." A few heads nodded. Melissa clicked the remote. A graph appeared. Then a clause. Clause 14. Eleanor's clause. In this case, our client placed revocation language into a co-signed home escrow, not for manipulation, not to hold it over anyone, but because she had seen what entitlement without accountability could become. Murmurs. Notes scribbled. One woman in a coral blazer looked near tears. Eleanor watched. Without blinking, this wasn't pride. It was validation. An hour later, she stood behind the podium herself. She had declined at first. Public speaking wasn't her arena, but Melissa had asked quietly, "Don't you think there's a woman in this audience who still thinks it's too late to protect herself?" So Eleanor stood. She didn't use notes. "I gave my son the opportunity of a future," she began, "but I gave myself the right to step away if that future erased my dignity." Silence fell in layers. She went on, her voice firm but unhurried. "The law is not just for the young, it's for the prepared. We are not burdens. We are co-signers, executors, stakeholders. We matter, not because we gave life, but because we are still living ours." When she stepped down, 3 women stood to applaud, then 6 more followed. One woman in the back wiped her eyes. Outside in the hallway, she was approached by a teller from a regional credit union in Ohio. Young, early 20s, name tag tilted slightly. She handed Eleanor a folded card. "I just wanted to say, you saved someone I love." Eleanor opened it after the woman walked away. Inside, "My mother was about to co-sign for my brother's startup loan. She didn't want to, but she thought it would be selfish not to. I sent her your story. She said no. Thank you." Eleanor ran her finger across the ink. It wasn't neat, but it was real. By the end of the week, Melissa had already received 3 requests to reprint the case study in training packets. The firm's blog saw a 400% increase in traffic. Eleanor agreed to write a monthly post. She called it The Fine Print, Legal Lessons from Living Long Enough. The first entry was published the following Monday. It was titled, "Permission Isn't Protection: Why Co-Signing Should Never Be Blind." Within 3 days, it had over 8,000 shares. Melissa emailed her late that night. "You have a following now. You're a voice." Eleanor didn't reply. Instead, she poured a glass of red and walked out to the patio, journal in hand. She opened to a fresh page. June 17th. "Boundaries aren't barriers, they're architecture." She wrote it slowly. Then, just before closing the book, she added, "And I've rebuilt mine in full view." The next morning, a legal training director from Denver reached out. Subject line, "Would you keynote our Elder Protection Summit?" She read it once, smiled, and left it marked unread for now, because she could. The final clause came in a fireproof envelope. Melissa slid it across the table with care. No fanfare, no lecture, just gravity. "This makes it permanent," she said. "Once filed, the trust becomes irrevocable. No reinstatement, no additions, no petitions after December 31st of this year, not even from you." Eleanor didn't blink. She was dressed in slate gray again, something ceremonial in its neutrality. Her hair pinned, her cane resting beside the chair like a sentry that no longer had to march. She opened the envelope and scanned the language. Irrevocable Clause 31.7, Permanent Disinheritance and Future Petition Lockout, effective January 1st, 2024. Below it, her medical proxy reassignment. Primary proxy, Darlene Monroe. Executor of trust, Melissa Chang. Her fingers paused just once at the bottom margin. A faint tremor in the wrist, not hesitation, but memory. Then the pen moved. She signed. Melissa collected the forms and slid them into a secure folio. "Your estate audit's already cleared. No conflicts. Nothing left that he could contest." Eleanor exhaled through her nose, calm as winter wind. "Good," she said. "Let it be the last paper with my name next to his." The audit results arrived via courier 3 days later. The trust was flawless. Every asset accounted for, every beneficiary current, no loopholes, no backdoors. The estate now operated like a sealed vault. No one could reach for a handle that wasn't theirs. Eleanor placed the audit summary in her drawer, beneath a velvet pouch that still held the scratched silver cane tip. It didn't ache anymore. Not the wrist, not the memory, just history, finally boxed. That evening, she sat on the porch with a cup of black tea and a half-read biography on her lap. The sky was ribboning into sherbet orange when her iPad pinged. From justin.win@gmail.com. Subject: I'm sorry. She didn't open it right away, just stared at the subject line as the screen dimmed slightly in the golden hour glow. Then, with a quiet tap, she read, Mom? I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I've had time, too much time, and I know now what I did, how I made you feel. It wasn't about the cane. I see that now. It was about how I made you invisible. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I miss you. Justin. The cursor blinked in the reply box. She sat with it for a long moment, the wind teasing the edge of her robe. Then she typed one line. I remember my cane. Do you? She hit send, then archived the thread. Across town, Justin sat in a studio apartment above a liquor store. Temporary. Housing, they called it. The ceilings were low. The water ran hot, then cold, then hot again. Claire was gone. The ring had been returned. He heard the ping and scrambled toward the laptop. One line, 12 words, each one heavier than any paragraph he could have sent. He didn't reply. He couldn't. He just sat back and stared as the screen dimmed and went black. That night, Eleanor returned to her journal. June 21st. Closure is not a door. It's a decision not to open it again. She looked at the line, let it settle, then added below it, final clause filed, no reinstatements, not even for memory. She closed the journal, blew out the candle, and slept soundly, dreamless, whole. The check was printed on cream parchment stock with ink thick enough to texture the page. It wasn't large by trust standards, 5 figures, not 6, but its impact would stretch farther than its decimal ever could. Payable to the Monroe Legal Futures Fund. Memo. For Aria Monroe, class of 2041. Eleanor slid it into an envelope embossed with a navy crest and sealed it shut with wax. She didn't tell Darlene in advance. She didn't need to. Gifts meant more when they arrived without warning, when they filled a space no one had dared name aloud. A week later, she received a letter in return. Not typed, not emailed. Handwritten in neat, youthful script. Dear Ms. Wynne, my Nana says you're the reason I get to dream bigger now. I want to be the kind of lawyer who helps women stand tall, like you. I hope someday you'll come see me graduate. Love, Aria Monroe, age 11. Eleanor placed the letter in the same drawer that once held her escrow files, now empty. Another envelope, thinner this time, was dropped off at the office of the Center for Elder Financial Justice. Inside, a certified check from the same reclaimed account Claire had once drained for a floral deposit. Eleanor included no letter. The gift would speak for itself. Later that month, she received a plaque in the mail. It read, In gratitude to Eleanor C. Wynne for transforming defense into dignity. She didn't display it. She placed it in her bookcase behind the hardcover edition of Women and Wills, Quiet Power in Legal Legacy, where it belonged. At the dining room table, Eleanor flipped through her final estate packet. Melissa had mailed it overnight. Everything was bound, dated, and notarized. Inside the final statement of intent, she rewrote her original legacy clause. Only those who stood beside me inherit. Not those who stood above me, not those who stood on me, beside. She signed it with a new pen, rose gold, engraved with a single word, sovereign. That afternoon, she opened the hallway closet, pulled out the cane, and ran a polishing cloth over its silver head one final time. The scratch near the base was still there. She no longer minded. She'd had a shadow box custom made. Walnut frame, museum glass, black velvet backing. At the bottom, a brass plaque. He took my cane. I kept walking. She hung it above her writing desk. Not as a warning, not even as a reminder, as a conclusion. The Banff trip had been Darlene's idea. A senior's rail pass, Group cabin, lakeside breakfasts, and glacier views from a gondola Eleanor never thought she'd trust with her knees. But she went. And when the wind whipped at her coat on the skywalk, and the guide shouted about tectonic shifts and million-year ice, she laughed harder than she had in a decade. One night, wrapped in a fleece throw and sipping spiced cider, she sat out on the lodge balcony with Darlene beside her and stared at a sky full of constellations she hadn't seen since childhood. "I don't think I've slept this well in years," she whispered. "You're lighter," Darlene replied. "I'm free," Eleanor said, and meant it. When she returned home, the house was as she'd left it, ordered, still, patient. She placed her suitcase in the laundry room, filled the kettle, and walked into her office. Her journal waited. She opened to a fresh page. June 30th. Love is not a leash. It's a choice. And I've chosen peace. She capped the pen, closed the book. Outside, the wind moved through her rose bushes, brushing against the window like breath, and her phone, silenced and distant, remained untouched. Section 14. The last transfer. 700 words. The check was printed on cream parchment stock with ink thick enough to texture the page. It wasn't large by trust standards, 5 figures, not 6, but its impact would stretch farther than its decimal ever could. Payable to the Monroe Legal Futures Fund. Memo. For Aria Monroe, class of 2041, Eleanor slid it into an envelope embossed with a navy crest and sealed it shut with wax. She didn't tell Darlene in advance. She didn't need to. Gifts meant more when they arrived without warning, when they filled a space no one had dared name aloud. A week later, she received a letter in return, not typed, not emailed, handwritten in neat, youthful script. Dear Ms. Wynne, my Nana says you're the reason I get to dream bigger now. I want to be the kind of lawyer who helps women stand tall, like you. I hope someday you'll come see me graduate. Love, Aria Monroe, age 11. Eleanor placed the letter in the same drawer that once held her escrow files, now empty. Another envelope, thinner this time, was dropped off at the office of the Center for Elder Financial Justice. Inside, a certified check from the same reclaimed account Claire had once drained for a floral deposit. Eleanor included no letter. The gift would speak for itself. Later that month, she received a plaque in the mail. It read, "In gratitude to Eleanor C. Wynne for transforming defense into dignity." She didn't display it. She placed it in her bookcase, behind the hardcover edition of Women and Wills, Quiet Power in Legal Legacy, where it belonged. At the dining room table, Eleanor flipped through her final estate packet. Melissa had mailed it overnight. Everything was bound, dated, and notarized. Inside the final statement of intent, she rewrote her original legacy clause: "Only those who stood beside me inherit, not those who stood above me, not those who stood on me, beside." She signed it with a new pen, rose gold, engraved with a single word: sovereign. That afternoon, she opened the hallway closet, pulled out the cane, and ran a polishing cloth over its silver head one final time. The scratch near the base was still there. She no longer minded. She'd had a shadow box custom-made, walnut frame, museum glass, black velvet backing. At the bottom, a brass plaque: "He took my cane." I kept walking. She hung it above her writing desk, not as a warning, not even as a reminder, as a conclusion. The Banff trip had been Darlene's idea: a senior's rail pass, group cabin, lakeside breakfasts, and glacier views from a gondola Eleanor never thought she'd trust with her knees. But she went. And when the wind whipped at her coat on the skywalk, and the guide shouted about tectonic shifts and million-year ice, she laughed harder than she had in a decade. One night, wrapped in a fleece throw and sipping spiced cider, she sat out on the lodge balcony with Darlene beside her and stared at a sky full of constellations she hadn't seen since childhood. "I don't think I've slept this well in years," she whispered. "You're lighter," Darlene replied. "I'm free," Eleanor said, and meant it. When she returned home, the house was as she'd left it, ordered, still, patient. She placed her suitcase in the laundry room, filled the kettle, and walked into her office. Her journal waited. She opened to a fresh page. June 30th. Love is not a leash, it's a choice. And I've chosen peace. She capped the pen, closed the book. Outside, the wind moved through her rose bushes, brushing against the window like breath, and her phone, silenced and distant, remained untouched. Section 14. The last transfer. 700 words. The check was printed on cream parchment stock with ink thick enough to texture the page. It wasn't large by trust standards, 5 figures, not 6, but its impact would stretch farther than its decimal ever could. Payable to the Monroe Legal Futures Fund. Memo for Aria Monroe, class of 2041. Eleanor slid it into an envelope embossed with a navy crest and sealed it shut with wax. She didn't tell Darlene in advance. She didn't need to. Gifts meant more when they arrived without warning, when they filled a space no one had dared name aloud. A week later, she received a letter in return, not typed, not emailed, handwritten in neat youthful script. Dear Ms. Wynne, my Nana says you're the reason I get to dream bigger now. I want to be the kind of lawyer who helps women stand tall. Like you. I hope someday you'll come see me graduate. Love, Aria Monroe, age 11. Eleanor placed the letter in the same drawer that once held her escrow files, now empty. Another envelope, thinner this time, was dropped off at the office of the Center for Elder Financial Justice. Inside, a certified check from the same reclaimed account Claire had once drained for a floral deposit. Eleanor included no letter. The gift would speak for itself. Later that month, she received a plaque in the mail. It read, "In gratitude to Eleanor C. Wynne for transforming defense into dignity." She didn't display it. She placed it in her bookcase behind the hardcover edition of Women and Wills, Quiet Power in Legal Legacy, where it belonged. At the dining room table, Eleanor flipped through her final estate packet. Melissa had mailed it overnight. Everything was bound, dated, and notarized. Inside the final statement of intent, she rewrote her original legacy clause. Only those who stood beside me inherit, not those who stood above me, not those who stood on me, beside. She signed it with a new pen, rose gold, engraved with a single word, sovereign. That afternoon, she opened the hallway closet, pulled out the cane, and ran a polishing cloth over its silver head one final time. The scratch near the base was still there. She no longer minded. She'd had a shadow box custom-made, walnut frame, museum glass, black velvet backing. At the bottom, a brass plaque. He took my cane. I kept walking. She hung it above her writing desk, not as a warning, not even as a reminder, as a conclusion. The Banff trip had been Darlene's idea. A senior's rail pass, group cabin, lakeside breakfasts, and glacier views from a gondola Eleanor never thought she'd trust with her knees. But she went, and when the wind whipped at her coat on the skywalk and the guide shouted about tectonic shifts and million-year ice, she laughed harder than she had in a decade. One night, wrapped in a fleece throw and sipping spiced cider, she sat out on the lodge balcony with Darlene beside her and stared at a sky full of constellations she hadn't seen since childhood. "I don't think I've slept this well in years," she whispered. "You're lighter," Darlene replied. "I'm free," Eleanor said, and meant it. When she returned home, the house was as she'd left it, ordered, still, patient. She placed her suitcase in the laundry room, filled the kettle, and walked into her office. Her journal waited. She opened to a fresh page. June 30th. Love is not a leash. It's a choice, and I've chosen peace. She capped the pen, closed the book. Outside, the wind moved through her rose bushes, brushing against the window like breath, and her phone, silenced and distant, remained untouched. The check was printed on cream parchment stock with ink thick enough to texture the page. It wasn't large by trust standards, 5 figures, not 6, but its impact would stretch farther than its decimal ever could. Payable to the Monroe Legal Futures Fund. Memo for Aria Monroe, class of 2041. Eleanor slid it into an envelope embossed with a navy crest and sealed it shut with wax. She didn't tell Darlene in advance. She didn't need to. Gifts meant more when they arrived without warning, when they filled a space no one had dared name aloud. A week later, she received a letter in return. Not typed, not emailed, handwritten in neat, youthful script. "Dear Ms. Wynne, my Nana says you're the reason I get to dream bigger now. I want to be the kind of lawyer who helps women stand tall, like you. I hope someday you'll come see me graduate. Love, Aria Monroe, age 11. Eleanor placed the letter in the same drawer that once held her escrow files, now empty. Another envelope, thinner this time, was dropped off at the office of the Center for Elder Financial Justice. Inside, a certified check from the same reclaimed account Claire had once drained for a floral deposit. Eleanor included no letter. The gift would speak for itself. Later that month, she received a plaque in the mail. It read, "In gratitude to Eleanor C. Wynne for transforming defense into dignity." She didn't display it. She placed it in her bookcase, behind the hardcover edition of Women and Wills, Quiet Power in Legal Legacy, where it belonged. At the dining room table, Eleanor flipped through her final estate packet. Melissa had mailed it overnight. Everything was bound, dated, and notarized. Inside the final statement of intent, she rewrote her original legacy clause. "Only those who stood beside me inherit. Not those who stood above me, not those who stood on me. Beside." She signed it with a new pen, rose gold, engraved with a single word, "Sovereign." That afternoon, she opened the hallway closet, pulled out the cane, and ran a polishing cloth over its silver head one final time. The scratch near the base was still there. She no longer minded. She'd had a shadow box custom-made, walnut frame, museum glass, black velvet backing. At the bottom, a brass plaque, "He took my cane." I kept walking. She hung it above her writing desk, not as a warning, not even as a reminder, as a conclusion. The Banff trip had been Darlene's idea. A senior's rail pass, group cabin, lakeside breakfasts, and glacier views from a gondola. Eleanor never thought she'd trust with her knees. But she went. And when the wind whipped at her coat on the skywalk, and the guide shouted about tectonic shifts and million-year ice, she laughed harder than she had in a decade. One night, wrapped in a fleece throw and sipping spiced cider, she sat out on the lodge balcony with Darlene beside her and stared at a sky full of constellations she hadn't seen since childhood. "I don't think I've slept this well in years," she whispered. "You're lighter," Darlene replied. "I'm free," Eleanor said, and meant it. When she returned home, the house was as she'd left it, ordered, still, patient. She placed her suitcase in the laundry room, filled the kettle, and walked into her office. Her journal waited. She opened to a fresh page. June 30th, "Love is not a leash. It's a choice. And I've chosen peace." She capped the pen, closed the book. Outside, the wind moved through her rose bushes, brushing against the window like breath. And her phone, silenced and distant, remained untouched. The audit request arrived at Justin's new mailbox in a plain white envelope marked Confidential-IRS Compliance Division. It wasn't a full investigation, yet. Just a review, triggered by flagged inconsistencies in attempted cosigner documentation and trust misrepresentation. The file used words like improper financial leverage and unauthorized continued beneficiary referencing. Justin read the letter 3 times before letting it slide from his fingers to the chipped linoleum floor of his apartment. Outside, traffic honked at a stalled delivery van. Inside, the silence pressed. He reached for his phone, again, but didn't open the Messages app. Not anymore. 2 states away, Eleanor sat on her back porch with a lemon spritzer and a crossword. The letter had arrived to her attorney the day prior, CC'd in her role as Origin Trust filer. She didn't gloat, didn't forward it to Darlene. She just read it, folded it, filed it in a red folder labeled Passive Outcomes. Melissa called that evening. "The IRS said your trust filing was a model of non-discretionary integrity. That language is going into their next training deck." Eleanor just hummed. "Clarity's never loud, it's just thorough." By mid-August, the garden was flush with summer bloom, hydrangeas heavy with color, roses arching like dancers mid-curtsy. On a Friday evening, Eleanor opened her home one last time. The dining room table had been set with white linen, her mother's silver, and mismatched wine glasses collected over the years, one for each chapter of her life. Darlene arrived first, wearing lavender and holding a fresh baguette wrapped in twine. Sharon and Ava followed, bearing lemon tarts and a bottle of wine whose label Eleanor didn't recognize but immediately approved. There was no occasion on the invitation. Just a handwritten note, final estate review, dress for relief. By the time they sat down, the light had turned golden and the laughter easy. When the plates were cleared and the first bottle gone, Eleanor lifted her glass. "To keeping receipts," she said, "legally and otherwise." Darlene let out a low laugh. "And to using them when it counts." They toasted. Not to revenge, not to bitterness, to vigilance. Later that night, the house was quiet again. Eleanor walked to the mantel, barefoot, her steps deliberate. The new frame sat between her bookends. Inside, 3 objects. The cane, its silver tip polished but unchanged. The deed, clipped at the signature line with a gold pin. The wine cork, from the bottle they opened the night she chose release over retribution. She stood looking at it for a long moment, then turned off the light. Across town, Justin sat in front of his glowing laptop, the IRS portal open, line items highlighted in yellow. Each section a reminder of what he'd tried to bend, each warning a line drawn in legal ink. He had thought this would pass, that time and silence would wash it all clean, but silence didn't forget. Silence just filed everything in order. In her journal, Eleanor wrote her final entry, July 8th. "Closure is not clean. It's complete." Then, below it, "He took my cane. I took everything else." She closed the book, not softly, deliberately.